But screwing with the wrong people.
The Walking Dead used to be a great show until it became unbearable to watch. It was once the biggest shows in the world. It was so good of a show that you felt something every time your favorite character died. Every time a main character was killed off, you felt a sense of sadness, you felt a sense of anger. You were invested in the story. And now when a main character dies, you kind of just shrug it off and wait for the next character to die. So what happened? What were the behind the scenes reasons for this show to fall off this bad? Well, in order to understand that, we have to understand who the executive producers and producers of the show were. The people that were in charge and made the decisions behind the scenes that led to the downfall of The Walking Dead. And in order to understand that, we're gonna have to start in the beginning with a man named Frank Darabont. The Walking Dead series was created by a man named Frank Darabont. Darabont is a director and screenwriter who got his foot in the industry in the 80s, working on other people's films as a writer. Frank wrote and directed an adaptation of Stephen King's story, The Woman in the Room, which made the semi-finalist for the Academy Awards. This short film created a good relationship between Darabont and Stephen King, with Darabont securing the rights to many of King's stories for film adaptations. Later in the 90s, Darabont decided to adapt another of Stephen King's stories into a film, which became the little-known film that most of you probably haven't heard of, called Shawshank Redemption. The film initially didn't make a lot of money upon its release in 1994, but it became the most rented movie of the year in 1995. So you can see how after Shawshank Redemption, Darabont was now a name in the industry, somewhat of a powerhouse. Now let's fast forward to 2005, where Darabont was casually browsing through a comic book store and came across a comic book named The Walking Dead. Darabont loved the comic. He was so interested that he met up with Robert Kirkman, the author of The Walking Dead comic, and pitched the idea of making a series adaptation. Kirkman stated that he was flattered by the pitch, and the reason why he agreed to the series adaptation was because he could tell that Darabont was passionate about the project, and he cared about the source material. Once Kirkman agreed to the adaptation, Darabont pitched the show to NBC, but they turned them down. Darabont then went to AMC, who greenlit the pitch solely off the strength of the source material and Darabont's name attached to the project. Darabont immediately went into directing the pilot episode and executive producing the first season. The season aired in 2011, with the pilot episode gaining 5.3 million views. And this was a big deal for AMC, because this was the most views for a premiere AMC episode ever in the company. This must have been great for AMC. Clearly they wouldn't want to ruin a good thing at the beginning, right? In 2011, Darabont was fired as showrunner by AMC, stating that the reasons for Darabont's firing was his inability to keep up with the schedule of running a series, and the other reason being that Darabont didn't want to have meetings with other directors about the overall direction season 2 should take. Darabont went out to debunk these claims and said that the real reason why he was fired was because of budgetary reasons. Apparently, Darabont intended for season 2 of The Walking Dead to be similar to season 1, that being a short season with less than 10 episodes. But AMC had other plans. AMC wanted the show to have 13 episodes, and not only that, but AMC wanted to decrease the episode budgets from $3.5 million to $3 million. This is so that they could keep the tax credit offered by the state of Georgia, that being where the show was filmed. So to sum it up, AMC wanted more episodes, more profits for 20% less of the money. Frank Darabont ended up leaving The Walking Dead, and Glenn Mazzara was brought in to showrun the series for the next 2 seasons. And I think this is where the cracks in The Walking Dead started to show. This is where we start to see the first reason why The Walking Dead gradually became a shadow of what it once was. That reason being corporate greed. I really don't want to go into the obvious, but firing Frank Darabont is just not a good decision for so many reasons.
And he was like, I heard that Frank Darabont's getting fired. And I was like, no way. No way. He just delivered AMC the biggest hit they've ever had.
He's the guy that pitched the idea for you. AMC is a company that was looking for a show to rival Game of Thrones, and Frank Darabont was the guy who came to them with that idea, and he achieved that goal. He gave them the most views for a premiere episode ever in the company. He's the guy that directed one of the greatest films ever directed, and on top of that, he's proven himself good at adapting stories into film. Almost all of his films prior to working with AMC were adaptations, a lot of them being from Stephen King. So clearly this is a guy who knows exactly what he's doing, and with season 1 being the success that it was, clearly he was doing it again, and he was making AMC a lot of money. But as usual, the men in suits didn't think about that. The only thing they think about is money. How can we make the most amount of money for the least amount of capital? Instead of trusting Darabont to do exactly the thing they hired him to do, the thing that he had proven himself good at doing, they decided to actually let go of him in the name of retaining tax credits, in the name of squeezing the little extra money they can make from him leaving. And when Frank Darabont left The Walking Dead, that's also when you could start to see just a little bit of a change in the quality of the show. Because in the beginning, season 2 was mostly about the characters and their relationship with one another in this new world. If you watch season 1, it's really about a man just trying to get to his family and make sure that they're okay. But then you have a character like Shane, who creates more problems than necessary, but at the same time, he's not necessarily a bad guy. Him sleeping with Rick's wife wasn't him trying to hurt Rick or trying to to be a villain in the series. His actions are justified when you look at the fact that he was genuinely trying to take care of Rick's family when they thought he was dead, and he was also trying to find comfort for himself, and Laura was also trying to find comfort for herself, and they just happened to find that in a romantic relationship with each other. This was the type of writing Frank Darabont came with when he was adapting The Walking Dead, and it's only after he leaves that the series starts focusing more on the walkers as the antagonist. Prior to this, the characters were nuanced. Everybody was a protagonist and everybody had a little bit of an antagonist inside them. But as the seasons continued after Darabont left, the show started being more about who's the villain of the season. It's not really about the character dynamics anymore. It's just about who are we going to get over today. It's more about who's the obstacle that we're going to have to overcome. One season it's the governor, the next season it's Gregory, the next season it's Negan, the next season it's Alpha. This is more of a basic way of telling the story of a zombie apocalypse. Most zombie apocalypse are built around the villains, whether it's the zombies or it's a person who's causing problems. And the thing that made The Walking Dead special was the fact that the story wasn't built around who's the villain, but instead it was built around how are these characters gonna get along with each other in order to survive. But the greed of AMC wanting more for less and wanting those tax write-offs was clearly stronger than they need to tell a good story. And even when I look at something like Warner Bros, where they also did a very similar thing, they didn't release movies that were already shot and edited, ready for release. They kept them in a vault and got their tax write-offs. But even with them, it's a little bit different because the DCEU was doing so terrible at the time that it wasn't even that great of a loss. Yes, we would have loved to watch those movies, but at the end of the day, the DCEU was going downhill. Almost all of their movies weren't good, so they desperately needed to go with a new direction. They literally needed to wipe the board clean and start from scratch, which they ended up doing with James Gunn. But with The Walking Dead, I can't find a redeemable reason why this decision was good. And this all leads us to the even bigger problem regarding the downfall of The Walking Dead, because you see, the person that replaced Frank Darabont was Glenn Mazzara, but he was only showrunner from season 2 to season 3. The guy that would end up spearheading The Walking Dead from season 4 to season 8 was Scott Gimple. And I'll give Scott and Glenn their credit where credit is due, because seasons 2 to around season 5 were still almost perfect seasons. Even though the show would have benefited greatly from having Frank Darabont stay and having shorter, more focused seasons, they still managed to find a way to make the show interesting enough for us not to jump ship as soon as Frank left. So they genuinely are good showrunners. But the corporate greed always wins in the end. After season 8, Scott Gimple was promoted to Chief Content Officer of The Walking Dead. What is a Chief Content Officer, you might ask? Scott clearly built a good relationship with the people at AMC, and this relationship was built around the same time that the MCU and DCEU were at their peak. Hollywood saw that fans loved interconnected universes, and AMC wanted a piece of that cake, so they began making a Walking Dead universe through multiple spin-off series. Fear the Walking Dead in 2015, The Walking Dead Beyond in 2020, Tales of the Walking Dead in 2022, The Walking Dead Dead City in 2023, The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon also in 2023, and The Walking Dead The Ones Who Live in 2024. An expanded universe. And Scott was overseeing all these projects, basically as the Kevin Feige of The Walking Dead. He was the guy in charge who took care of everything in the universe. And here's another reason why The Walking Dead died. The Walking Dead as a series is a show that overstayed its welcome. And that's just as one show. Because Robert Kirkman said in multiple interviews that he wants The Walking Dead to be different from other zombie apocalypse stories, he made the deliberate decision for there not to be a cure. So this is a world where zombies overtook society, and unlike movies like World War Z, there is no cure. There will never be an end to the zombie apocalypse. Society has no choice but to just learn how to live a new way. That's one of the things that makes The Walking Dead different. And as great as a concept as that is, you only have so much story that you can tell with that kind of concept. And personally, I don't think that type of concept can last longer than 6-ish seasons. Because at the beginning of The Walking Dead, it's a very interesting show because we're introduced to this world at the same time as Rick is. He's reacting the same way that we would react. When he sees that little girl for the first time, he gets scared. When he sees walkers for the first time, he panics. The exact same way we would react. But eventually around season 3, he doesn't have that reaction anymore. He's grown accustomed to this new world, and so has everyone else around him. Yes, they're still trying to make it by, but for the most part, they've learned how to live amongst these walkers. So what other story can you tell when your protagonist in this new world has learned how to live in this new world? Well, the best next thing you can do is come up with a bunch of interesting villains. You can try to showcase how in a zombie apocalypse, it's not always the zombies that are the biggest threat. It can be other people. And then now you get your governors and your alphas and your Negans. And then now once we've had that for multiple seasons, what else can you tell? Because again, there's no cure, there's no end to the story. Well, logically you end the series when Rick dies, but they didn't do that because they wanted that Marvel Cinematic Universe level of constant profits, so they kept the show going. And now there's no real new story to tell because anything you throw at the characters at this point, they've already experienced more than once. And now we end up at a point where it kind of feels like the show has nothing else to say, and that's already bad on its own, but now they create multiple spin-off series that also have nothing else to say. One could argue that Fear the Walking Dead is interesting because it takes the perspective of how a family, not a bunch of strangers, but a family, a mother and her children, survive in this new world. And that would be interesting, but again, we've already seen that in The Walking Dead. Because yes, most of the protagonists are strangers, but in the first couple seasons, Rick is with his family. and he's trying to protect them. That's kind of the main premise of the series. So now this fresh perspective that Fear the Walking Dead is giving me isn't all that fresh because I've seen it in the original series. The Walking Dead Beyond is about kids who grew up in this new world, and now they share an interesting perspective because they have no reference to what the world used to be. The only thing they know is chaos. And at face value, that would be an interesting approach to take, but again, we've already seen that through Carl. Because yes, he does have a reference to what the previous world was like, but for the most part, he was still very, very young. So he's a kid who grew up in this new world, and we've seen how that changes someone. A lot of Carl's story was built on how he was supposed to be an innocent little boy, but because he had to adapt to this new world, he became cold and hollow, and way more mature than a kid his age should be. So again, the perspective of showing kids in this new world is already done before in the original series. The Walking Dead Dead City is about Negan's redemption arc. Again, this doesn't work because most of the Walking Dead fandom has made it clear that they didn't want Negan to have a redemption arc. A lot of fans really just wanted Negan to die. A lot of fans wanted to see Maggie and Rick get their revenge on Negan. And now you're giving us a character who a lot of people still like, but he's still a very evil person, and a lot of people still haven't forgiven him for killing Glenn. Now you're forcing us to watch a series about his redemption arc, and half of the fandom isn't gonna watch it because they don't like him that much. And just to be clear, I'm talking about the character Negan, not the actor. Everyone loves Jeffrey Dean Morgan. The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon is about Daryl in France. Again, this doesn't work because Daryl became a fan favorite character, and the reason why he became the fan favorite character is because of his relationship and dynamic with the rest of the crew. When Daryl's character was first introduced, his first impression told us that he was just another redneck hillbilly with no redeemable qualities, and it's only when we see that he has a heart of gold that we start to care and love him. When Carol's daughter was missing, that was when we started to love him because he showed that he was the guy in the crew who cared about Carol's daughter as much as Carol did. You wouldn't think Daryl was the type of person to have protective big brother energy, the older guy in the crew who makes sure that all the kids and all the younger people in the crew are well and taken care of. But it's Daryl who fills this role. He endlessly looks for Carol's daughter. He makes sure that Beth is okay, and he's the guy that always had Rick's back, forming a kind of brotherly relationship with Rick. And now that he's stripped away from his crew, that dynamic changes. And yes, you can try to rebuild it with new characters in France, but those characters are just people that a lot of us don't really care about because we don't know them like that. And yes, if you watch the series, you'll probably start to care about them, but most people just want to see Daryl with the crew. So again, not the best idea for a series. Corporate greed is the death of all art. I recently made a video about how the MCU ruined itself by mass producing movies that don't really have a theme or any actual story to tell. And now it basically feels like I'm making the exact same video but just about The Walking Dead. And it's scary how similar they are. Hollywood has been in a trend of prioritizing short-term profits over storytelling, and The Walking Dead is just another example of that. AMC fired Frank Darabont because they wanted to lower the budget of the series and make more episodes. Corporate greed. They kept the series going far longer than it should have. Corporate greed. And they expanded it into a universe with spin-offs that had nothing to say and no new interesting perspectives. Corporate greed. With 1,000 subscribers, I'm really trying to hit 2,000 subscribers, so if you really like this video, please hit the like and please hit the subscribe button because I have more content like this on the way. And thanks for watching.